a lot of stuff going on for the kids, and that's good. Okay, I think that's it. Today, what we're going to do for the message is we're going to do our annual State of the Church address. And so I'm going to bring Justin and Mark up here. All three pastors will be here, and this is something that there's always a State of the Union address where the president gets up and talks about here's what's going on in the country. There's a State of the State address where the governor, that's mine, yeah, where the governor, Mark's trying to steal my, first thing that happened right off the bat is Mark, where the governor talks about, what's going on in the state. Well, this is the State of the Church address. Well, we're just going to talk about a few things. We'll talk some about last year, but mostly, about last year and what we're going to do this year. So that's the point of this today. We do this every year. It's just a time to kind of make sure, well, not make sure, but just kind of get us all on the same page. As this is what's happened, this is where we've been in the last 12 months, and this is where we see ourselves going here as a church family, and we really are a family, and we really are connected with each other in so many ways. So this is a chance just to touch base on a lot of those things, and so the three of us will be doing that, and we're going to start today with just finances. So I'm going to invite Jim up here. Jim is the chairman of the board of trustees. He handles in a big way lots and lots of the finances, and the church is an organization, and the church has a budget, and the church has finances, and so it's important just to know where we're at. So Jim, take it away.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming to the State of the Union. Anyway, let's start with finances. First of all, we're not selling anything. Everything that comes in is contributions. Sit up. We don't know. How's that? Effective mic.
Yeah, we got to go buy a new one.
You have to check the finances.
Here, this one works.
We got all kinds of these. Well, anyway, we don't spend money loosely, so we'll try to fix that. As I was saying, we don't sell anything. We're not offering a service here. All the contributions, the tithe comes in through members. And we as the Board of Trustees are responsible to oversee those funds to make sure that we're using them appropriately and doing God's work. So just got a couple slides here. The first one is finances over. You may not be able to see those, but we'll send those out. We do a quarterly recap, and we'll send that out this month. But 2018, 2019, 2020, the gold is our income, and the blue is our expenses. So we had a really good 2020. With all the things that we've been through COVID, we did not see a dramatic drop in contributions, so God has really provided us. But as we get into other things, we can see how that may change. But so let's go to the next one. There again, annual expenses. 2020, our average monthly income was $32,000. Our expenses were $23,000. The budget was $25,000. So we did make some changes early on because of COVID. We weren't meeting at church and such, so very good. I mean, we shouldn't complain here. So let's go on to the next one. Okay. Going ahead for 2021, we kept our budget at $25,000. Inflation obviously goes up, but we've been able to maintain all of our expenses. Payroll is our biggest expense, as our staff is. That's what we do. We have to have people to operate it. Our church budget, as far as the daily, monthly expenses, are pretty contained. We meet monthly as trustees, see where we're at, and when we do have surpluses, we put those out as savings, emergency funds, do equipment. So, yeah. One more? The building campaign, that was one thing I wanted to talk about. We did a building campaign for a new facility over there. Started in June 2017. 3 years. We pledged from folks $511,000, and of that, 466 came in. Now, that was 90% of all pledges. That's wonderful. And we have no debt. Everything's paid off. We have a little money in our budget for a future use. We'll need a roof in the church at one point in time. So I think that's about it. One more? Benevolence, okay. During 2020, we put aside money for local church families and also some community services that we do. Last year we distributed $4,700, and again we focus on the church family. So these are some of the, next slide, some of the places that we help. Salvation Army, CareLink, Hope Gospel, Good News, and any other thing that we need. So that's it.
Hey, Jim, hang on a second. Hang on a second. So just, we've got no debt and we have cash reserves. Is that?
That is correct.
Yeah, and fairly substantial cash reserves.
Fairly substantial.
Yeah, so financially we're in a good place. Our budget's been good. Does anyone have questions for Jim or for about the budget at all?
We're sitting well. We have a nice emergency fund. We have a fund for, I was saying our roof here. At one point in time we have to replace the roof. We won't need to do a capital campaign for that. We have money for that. Yeah. We're going to do some upgrade our lighting out in the foyer there, LED lighting. It's something that we can just do. Yeah. I think another thing was the security cameras.
Yeah,
we talked about. So
yeah. So okay, any questions that you guys would? Yeah, Amy. Go ahead.
Yes. As far as checks and balances, yes, we do. We have different people handle different parts of the money that comes in, and so there's lots of checks and balances that we've integrated over the years. We try not to have one person do everything, and so if someone's writing a check, someone else is approving that check to be written. We do, I don't know how you'd say it, but the reconcile the checkbook, everything is pretty much above board, and it's always open if anybody has any questions. And that's why the Board of Trustees really pay attention to those numbers to make sure something doesn't happen. Because you've seen that throughout the Chippewa Valley. It's unfortunate, but I feel pretty comfortable with what we're doing, with the steps that we've taken. So.
That's a good question. Like for example, I know on Sunday mornings, 2 people will take that green box back. They'll count it.
Yep.
A different person will then recount it and make the deposit. Then Renee is the one who enters it all in the books, yep. And then the Board of Trustees. So there's lots of different hands on this. Like I say, because we're doing actively watching the bank statements, during the month we have online banking, so you can see transactions. And if there's anything that isn't right, that can be taken care of right away. We really want to be above board. We don't need any bad publicity. So. Anything else for Jim?
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, guys.
All right, just a couple more items about finances. One is I really, Jim mentioned that we don't sell anything. We don't bring in other income. Occasionally we have a rental for the building or something like that, but that's pretty minor. But it's all that other money is donated, contributed by you all, and that is wonderful. And I think looking back over it's going on a year since the pandemic started, and it interrupted normal things. And I first thought, well, not my first thought, but when we quit meeting, I thought, gee, we won't be passing a basket. Boy, the contributions are going to just dry up. And they didn't. And
They went up.
They went up. And it's wonderful. That's a tribute to you all. And that I just wanted to acknowledge that and express our gratitude as a church. We faithfully give. The Board of Trustees, there are 6 currently members of the board, Bob Parsons, Deb Wells, Dan Hendrington, Jim Myers, Rob Gerber, and myself. And the Board of Trustees make all the money decisions. As pastors, they've given us the freedom to spend up to $200 without consulting the board. And actually, during this pandemic, they extended that to for benevolence. We could, if we became aware of someone in need, we could meet that need up to a certain point without, calling the board together. Otherwise, all the other money decisions have to be made by the board when there's a quorum and all of that. So, and they do take to Amy's question, they do take a careful look every month at all of the accounts, and if there's any irregularities, they want to know, okay, what that account looks like it's swelled, or there isn't the right number in there. And so they do carefully consider that. So, and the secretary to the board is Justin. And Renee Waneke is the bookkeeper. She keeps the books and creates the reports. And Jim oversees that. And I'm very comfortable with what's going on with that. As far as another financial item is, we are as of January 1, our relationship with our Association of Churches. There was a national organization that. Those things have changed. Rob might mention that a little later, but we formerly sent 10% of what the monies we received. We sent 10% of that to a central organization. And one of the major things they did with that, our region did with that money, is support foreign missionaries, and that's changed since they aren't getting that. We are now there's some other that money is staying here. And we need to decide how to spend that. And one of the things we'd like to do is consider both these missionaries who formerly were getting our support kind of indirectly, is consider those and how we might support them. Also, Jim mentioned the few of the local organizations that we do regularly support, because we trimmed that back. Year and a half ago, or
no, it was the beginning of this year,
the,
or maybe I forget when.
We trimmed back the local support to just a few: CareLink and Hope and Prison Fellowship or Jail Ministry. And so we are looking for people that might be interested in evaluating where we could support local and foreign missions. So if that's something that you'd be interested in having a voice to help determine how we would use the resources God has entrusted us with, we would welcome your input. And so I think Rob has talked to a couple folks that have agreed to that. But if that's something that would be of interest to you, please contact Rob. He's driving that boat right now. So,
yeah, just to clarify that just a little bit, we had been sending a chunk of money to the region, and they would use that chunk of money to fund overseas missionaries. We're no longer sending that money to the region. We're just going to take it and directly give it to missionaries. So it's not new money we're spending. It's just that we are now deciding where it goes. So so it's not anything new in the budget. But we're just looking for people to say, hey, who could maybe do this? And so far I've talked to Daniel and Lana and Don Breedel, and they've agreed to do it. But like Mark said, if you're interested in that kind of thing, deciding where we would, who we would support as far as overseas and even local ministries, that's available.
Okay. All right. Enough about money. Ministries. Justin's going to talk a bit about ministries in 2020.
Do I have to stand? Okay. You stood.
If your legs aren't working, I guess. No.
Well, for those of you who've been around for the last 9 months, you guys probably recognize we've had a lot of challenges in 2020. It has been a very, very interesting year. And I'm 32, so I haven't lived through a lot of crazy political tumultuous times. So for me, this has kind of been new, and I'm grateful for Mark and Rob because they point out there's nothing new under the sun, and you guys, many of you are older than me, have experienced things similar to this, but maybe not a pandemic quite like we have been experiencing. And so because of the pandemic, we saw a lot of things happen. We saw Governor Evers put an order in place where he effectively shut us down for 8 weeks, and we complied with that. And so with that, we had to make a lot of adjustments to how we do ministry, and our biggest ministry is typically our Sunday mornings. And so you guys saw us do some adjustments. We started pre-recording messages. We would get together on Saturday mornings, whichever pastor was speaking or pastors were speaking, and Jeff Ralph or Luke Johnson would record either 2 copies or 1 copy of that message, and we'd open it up for you guys to come view that live. But then that recording would be available Sunday morning, and we did that as we transition. And then we continued to pre-record. Once that order was over, we put together a document on what we were going to do for safe practices. We continued to pre-record on Saturday. Then we began to also speak on Sunday. And Luke Johnson spearheaded us moving to live stream, which really alleviated a lot of the administrative burden and the labor that went into pre-recording, editing a message, then also giving it again on Sunday morning. And so shout out to Jeff Ralph and Luke Johnson who helped us with pre-records, and a shout out to Luke who helped us with the live streaming capability. Woo! Yeah, and so COVID-19 really threw a monkey wrench in how we do ministry here at Cedar Creek, and one of the things I did want to talk about a little bit about is our face-to-face ministries have had to change or evolve a little bit in the last 9 months, and one of the big hurdles or obstacles that we have really faced was staffing, volunteers. And, here at Cedar Creek, we do have a limited staff. We've got Kim Johnson, who has been diligently and faithfully working to keep this building clean, surfaces sanitized, and everything tidy. So thank you, Kim Johnson, for all that you do here at Cedar Creek. We have another full-time pastor. We have Rob, who's full-time here and part-time with the region. I'm full-time, so I'm the operations manager here. And then we have Nancy Z, who about 1.5 years ago went half-time, and she's our secretary and administrative assistant. So you guys, if you've had contact with the church, you've probably went through Nancy. Am I forgetting anyone? Is that? Renee. Oh, and Mark. Oh, yeah. He apparently is invisible. We got
Looked
Mark
me in
here.
the eyes and said, "Am I forgetting anyone?"
And we have Mark Anderson, who's a part-time pastor here too, and so he spends 1 day a week kicking stuff around with us. But
And Renee.
and Renee, who's our bookkeeper. But we have a very small staff. Yeah, she works hard every Thursday here, making sure everything is balanced and square. Asks me a lot of questions, and I smile and nod.
But we've got you and I and Kim are full time.
Yep.
Nancy's half time. Mark and Renee are 1 day a week ish, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So so thank you to all of those people who are involved, but we do have a pretty small staff, and trying to navigate all the things that have been going on in the world around us has been a little interesting. And so a lot has fallen on those people's shoulders to get things done. And I want to acknowledge some of you have given us some really fantastic ideas on how to rework ministries and redo things. A lot of that stuff takes a lot of labor, a lot of effort, a lot of manpower, a lot of thought. And being a small staff, we haven't been able to do some of those things. And so for those of you who have given us ideas on how to restructure stuff, we are incredibly grateful, and we love to hear your ideas, but we can't always, as a small paid staff, manage and get all those things working. But I do want to talk about some of the ministries that have continued to function throughout this crazy time. In the fall, we saw the Awana ministry restart, which was incredibly exciting, I think, for the children and the parents. Especially, I can think of my children who just about squeal when they get out of bed on Wednesday mornings because Awana is coming up tonight. And so Nikki and Ryan have worked really, really diligently to make that happen. They, as far as I know, they structured some things off of how we reopened Sunday morning services and tweaked that a little bit for the Awana ministry. And so they've worked really hard, and there have been a lot of other people working incredibly hard to make that program happen. So thank you, Ryan and Nikki, for all that you've done, and everybody who volunteers at Awana on Wednesday nights. And we have a lot of kids stuff that's been popping up, too. We have a middle school group, which Paul Fila and his family have been working hard at. Every Sunday at 11:30, they get together with the middle schoolers. There's a lesson. There's some fun stuff they do together. And so they've been working hard, I believe, since the summer and making that happen. And the lessons have been sometimes the Filas, sometimes other folks, sometimes Rob has spoken. I've done some videos for them. And so we've been trying to have an influence on the middle schoolers despite what's going on in the world around us. And then we also, as another kid program, Rob mentioned it during announcements, our children's ministry on Sunday mornings restarted just a couple weeks ago. And so we have our nursery and our Sunday school meeting on the other side of the wall again. And I have to say thank you, Emily Wickman, who is the coordinator of Sunday school. Thank you, Abby Walter, who's coordinating nursery, and Lana Fila, Nikki Rudak, Sarah Spencer, and Caroline Lloyd, who have worked effortlessly to continue to restructure the program so that we could address the risks that we were facing, but also just to make sure it was as welcoming as an environment as they could make it. And so a round of applause for all of those who've been involved in that. They've worked really hard on that. And so, they've worked really hard on that. It's been fun to see and be a part of that conversation. And if anybody is interested in volunteering there, shameless plug, there is a document on the back table there. It's printed in a mustard yellow color or gold color. That explains what practices they're putting in place. And so if you're theoretically interested in volunteering, check that out so that you can make a educated decision on if you're comfortable with volunteering in the nursery and Sunday school. And so if there's anybody out there, please consider that. Another thing that's been going on in the building here as a ministry is we have a safety team. Lauren Spencer is the lead on that, and Jared Polden and a few others work on that safety team. But they're the guys who keep security kind of at that check-in desk. They're watching what's going on in the building. They're keeping an eye on our kids and making sure they're safe, just an additional check and balance within the church. And one of the things that we're currently working through, and this is just to initially breach the subject, I guess, we are currently working on adding a security system. And that what I mean by that is we're going to add some cameras in the building at entrances and exits, and also in the outside of the lot, covering the parking lot and the playground area. So we are currently working through, we have a number of different ideas on how to do that. We're working through the myriad of things that go into where's the best location, who's going to be viewing it, where we're storing it, and all that, storing that footage and whatnot. So that's coming. We're working on that right now. Couple more ministries that were happening in 2020. We have our Care and Compassion ministry. They work a lot of the times under the radar, but they do a lot here at Cedar Creek. And I was talking to Brianna a little bit about it. There's a lot of big events that we usually are real public about throughout the year. We'll have them in the announcements, we'll have them in the bulletin, we'll have them on the website, we'll be talking about them on Cedar Creek Community Chat. And a lot of those things this year didn't happen at all or went virtual. And so they've kept their thumbs or fingers on those things and done what they can to promote them. For example, the Apple Walk for Life was last spring. That, of course, got canceled and went virtual, and so you went and walked it by yourself. This fall, they have been keeping up with the We Care Eau Claire program, and there was a fundraiser for school supplies, and so they made sure that Cedar Creek was involved with that, and so we raised school supplies for local children, and they've been working pretty effortlessly on that as well. And one of the things that the Care and Compassion does that we don't really talk about a lot is they make a lot of phone calls and they send a lot of emails to folks who can't regularly attend Cedar Creek. And so they keep in touch with folks who just can't make it here. And they've continued to do that throughout this time, and I think that's been an incredibly valuable service to those who can't regularly make it, even when we aren't in a pandemic time. Separate from Care and Compassion, but also led by Brianna Novacek, she leads both of these, we have this Meals Ministry. And we've talked about Meals Ministry here at Cedar Creek before, but they keep an eye on folks in the church. Basically, hey, did somebody have a baby? Did somebody have some sort of medical event? Are they tied up at home? And would they be blessed by a meal here at Cedar Creek? And so they've kept their finger on that, and they were able to deliver through their watching and scheduling of people 78 meals to 10 different families throughout 2020. And I'm just impressed by that because, that's quite a few a month throughout the 9 months we've been going through this time. And so a shout out to Brianna Novacek, who's been coordinating all of those things, and Randy Johnson, who's been working with Hope Gospel and all the other care and compassion related things we're doing. Two last things before I pass this over to Mark. One of the things that we have been doing for years is we have a weekly women's prayer. And these women get together and they pray over stuff that's going on. And, of course, that hasn't been happening in person. That's been happening digitally over Zoom. But they have continued to faithfully pray over Cedar Creek, over you guys, over prayer requests that you make known. And so that's still happening. And a shout-out to all the ladies who are involved with that. And lastly, another one of those under-the-radar things that has been a tremendous blessing to a lot of families here at Cedar Creek is we do have a moms group here. And Brianna Novacek, Abby Walter, and Leah Grunig run that. And they set a schedule of times where parents can get together, moms and their kids can get together and have play dates, talk about scripture, talk about how to be better moms, how to grow in parenting and whatnot. And so throughout the summer, they were working hard to get people together, but do it outside and minimize risk as best as they possibly could. And they've started to move inside here as the winter months have hit us. And so a shout out to those three ladies who have been working diligently to make sure that moms are supported in parenting and can rub shoulder to shoulder through the difficulties of everything we're going through. So speaking of community, I'll pass this off to Mark.
I'm going to talk briefly about community. I thought back to, I looked back at my notes from last year's State of the Church, and in this section, what things we were doing. We had just started our second round of Tables of Six. Many of you remember being involved with Tables of Six, getting together, having a meal with folks, and we were just getting the second round of that started when March 2020 came. So we had our fall festival. We'd been having Saturday morning round tables. There'd been a women's Christmas gathering at Christmas. The women had just gone through Emotionally Healthy for a number of weeks, gathered to discuss and work their way through that material. And so there was a lot going on that built community, and then the pandemic came, and community's been a little more challenging. Face-to-face is preferable to Zoom. I don't know. I Zoom for my job at the hospital. I Zoom our life group. Zoom. But anyway, it's not the same as being together. And I was looking at a verse in Romans. It says, so we, though many, are one body in Christ and individually members of one another. We are members. We are connected. As members of Christ's body, we are connected, and we need each other. The parts of my body don't get along alone. They need each other, and we do as members of the body need each other. And so how we've done community through this pandemic has been challenging. We've done what we can, I think. And Justin mentioned, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but going forward, how we can be creative in enhancing community. But it's not the same. It's not the same when we can gather freely as either big groups, small groups, medium-sized groups. And sometimes I get afraid that the consequence of ongoing isolation, we're going to get used to not being together, and then we're going to forget how to do it or lose that desire. And we don't want that to happen. We want to continue to desire to get together. And one of the things we do to enhance community is we have life groups, small groups here at Cedar Creek, and we are still committed to small groups, life groups. We have about 10 life groups, 80 to 100 people involved, and And I in 1 Corinthians 12, it talks about we're members of one body, and it talks about, some of us are eyes, and some are ears, and some are hands, and some are feet. And I thought about that, and what life groups allow us to do is get to know each other better, because it's hard to recognize eyes and ears and feet when you just say hi on Sunday morning. But when you're in your life group, your smaller situation, you get to know people, and you find out that they're either similar to you in ways you didn't know, or they're very different from you in ways you didn't know. I learned yesterday that another guy in our life group can't do Sudoku puzzles either. I've wondered, I thought I was probably the only person, thought I was fairly intelligent, but I can't do those puzzles. And I found out there's somebody else like me. Oh, there's two. Anyway, so that's one of the things life groups do, is we get to be together and find out how we fit together and how we engage that way. So we've done different life groups are doing things different. Some are sometimes they get together in person. Some are virtual. Our life group is virtual, although when the weather was nicer, we could do things outside. Cold weather's made it a little more difficult, but we're continuing to meet together. There are, if you are interested in being in a life group, or even if you're interested in gathering some people around and starting a life group, let me know. Talk to me. Just had a conversation a couple weeks ago. A couple that's thinking about gathering some folks together, getting together, and that's great, and we can help you get that going. So let me just look and see if there's anything. Yeah, and as we've gone through this pandemic, there's, like I said, there's different levels of comfort with being together in person. There's been different challenges to our unity this year, and we need to negotiate that as brothers and sisters in Christ. And I was looking at in Ephesians, it says, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit. And that's in the Ephesians, and this was a church that had people that were bondservants, people that were masters, people that were Gentiles, people that were Jews. They were not all the same, and they had differences to manage, and so we do too. And so that's what community is about. It's about living in community and in unity in Christ. And so I'm going to pass it off to Rob now. He's going to talk a bit about that and about leadership.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump off that a little bit. First of all, I'm going to say that I can't even pronounce Sudoku. I get the O's and U's mixed up.
You know, you can get an app on your phone that
I just start off on the wrong foot.
If I could say it, maybe I could do it. That what Mark has been talking about, God gives all these different word pictures of what the church is like. And some of them are relational, some of them are missional, some of them are functional. But I think what Mark was talking about kind of speaks to some of those things that the church is like a family, and it's very much relational, and there's connections and commitment and loyalty to each other. It's a flock. That's one of the words that God uses, where we're all kind of in this thing together, and what affects me affects you, and we kind of have the same environment. And so just want to jump off of that a little bit and just acknowledge, I guess, 2020 was a year that gave us opportunities to work at that, because there are many things in 2020 that, like Mark said, worked to perhaps strain our family relationships, our brother and sister relationships, things that happened in 2020 that worked to strain our unity. Some of them were physical. We just couldn't see each other the way that we used to. You couldn't gather together the way that we used to, and so there's that physical distance, which makes it a little bit harder. Some of it was ideological. That we had things happen in 2020 that we all looked at and made decisions about, and we discovered that my decisions might be very different than the next person's decisions, and those decisions have ramifications, and it's been very emotional. It's been an emotional year, and our emotions have gotten stirred in all kinds of ways. I mean, you look at what's happened with the pandemic and the politics and the racial tensions. These are not just intellectual ideas; they are very emotional. And when your emotions get stirred, and someone else's emotions are stirred, that can be a strain on unity and on those family brother-sister relationships. And so 2020 has been a tough year. Well, not tough. It's been an opportunity for us to do that. It's been an opportunity for us to do some things that we talked about here in Romans 14. And back in the summer, we here at church talked about this as we were kind of heading into these times, kind of seeing what was in the future a little bit. We talked about just how can we, as a church family, manage all these difficult, emotional ideas. We all have different ideas and they stir us differently. How can we manage that? And we looked a lot at Romans 14 and one of the, right away in Romans 14:3 it says, Paul's talking here about a situation in the Church of Rome that they were having. Some people thought that eating meat sacrificed to idols was a sin. Some people thought it's not only not a sin, it's just fine, it's no big deal. And there was an emotional connection to it, and there was different ideas, and people had different ideas, and this is what Paul says. The man who eats everything must not look down on him who does not eat, and the man who does not eat everything must not condemn the man who eats, for God has accepted him. Who are you to judge someone else's servant? To his own master he stands or falls, and he will stand, for the Lord is able to make him stand. And just this, the idea there that Paul is saying, look, there's a difference of opinion here. One person thinks this very strongly, one person thinks this very strongly. Because we think it very strongly, our emotions are tied up in it. What Paul is saying here is, okay, that's fine. You think this and you think that. The most important thing is not that I convince you to think like me or that we all think alike. The most important thing is I trust you to go to the Lord, and I'm going to let you go to the Lord. And if you think differently than me, okay. I'm going to still, you are still my brother. I'm not going to condemn you. I'm not going to reject you. There is that unity. And we've had to do that here in 2020. I mean, you look around. You know, the elephant in the room sometimes, you look around the room, about half of you are wearing masks, half of you aren't. That's just forced us to decide. And that's, everybody makes that choice based on things that they believe. But then our emotions are tied up in that as well. And so then we look at other people who are doing it differently, and it's become difficult, hasn't it? I mean, I'm not saying anything that you guys don't know. That's just been the reality. It's true of politics. You know, you voted one way or another. You're excited about the election. You're upset about the election. Okay, there are ideas tied to that, and there are emotions tied into it. And there's people in this room that are on the other side of that aisle from you, and it's given us. We've been faced with an opportunity. Lord, how do I do that? How do I really recognize that my ideas about these things, I hold them strongly and I'm going to act on them, but that person, my brother or sister that sits in the same church with me, holds different ideas strongly, and they're acting on them. It's right there in front of us. It's right there. Am I going to really trust that you're seeking the Lord and know that, you know what, God's going to speak to you, God's going to speak to me, but we are still brothers and sisters in the Lord. It's been right in front of us, and I think that we have done well. I honestly really do, and I've said this as this has gone on over the years. I've been so blessed by this church family because we have done well. Clearly, there have been differences of opinion, and sometimes you get into a conversation, and the conversation can even get heated. That's okay. I think we have done very, very well. And in Romans 14, as he goes on, Paul spends the whole chapter talking about this topic. But in verse 13, he says, "Therefore, let us stop passing judgment on one another. Instead, make up your mind not to put any stumbling block or obstacle in your brother's way." And guys, in all honesty, I think we have done very well this past year. Of course, we're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. I've looked back and thought, oh, gosh, I wish I wouldn't have said that. I've had to go and apologize. Probably all of us have. But for the most part, I think we have done very, very well in that at Cedar Creek. So looking back, I think, boy, this has been a tough year. It's been a good year. When things like that happen, it is a great opportunity for us to grow in our relationship with the Lord and our relationship with each other. They really are. Without things like this help to build our unity if we respond well to them. I really think we've responded well. But here's what's happening, I think. We're now at 2021. I almost did a message to start the year saying, don't get too excited that 2020 is gone, because I don't know how much is going to change. I didn't give that message. But I think what's happening is, I find in myself, and I suspect in most of us, we're working hard to be considerate. We're working hard to hold my convictions but not condemn you for holding different convictions. It's getting wearying, isn't it? It gets tiring. And we get tired of talking about it, and we get tired of always having to, I think so strongly this, but when I go to church, I have to kind of put that under wraps a little bit because someone else thinks strongly that. That gets wearying. I understand that. God understands that. And he tells us, I think here in Romans 14, that that's going to happen, but keep going. Here in verse 19. Let us therefore make every effort to do what leads to peace and to mutual edification. Do not destroy the work of God for the sake of food in that case. Make every effort. Make every effort. We're not done with this good but very hard work of loving each other even though we disagree with each other. I want to say that again. We are not done with this very, very good but extremely hard work of loving each other even though we disagree with each other. 2021, we're still there, and that's okay. Let's just keep going. It says that the world will know that we are Christ's disciples by the love we have for each other, not that we are right on every issue. You ever think about that? We can be completely different, have two completely, absolutely different ideas about politics or pandemics. And the issue of who's right and who's wrong isn't what's going to influence the world around us. It's whether we love each other in the middle of it. You and I want to end with this verse in Galatians 9. And the reason we're talking about this is I think going into 2021, this is maybe the biggest ministry of our church, is loving each other well when it's getting tiring, when we're getting tired doing it. In Galatians 6, verse 9, maybe this should be our theme for the year. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. And the harvest we'll reap is our God is honored. The harvest we'll reap is we have peace. The harvest we'll reap is the people around us are blessed. The harvest we'll reap is that the world is influenced. These are things God says will happen. If we keep doing what we've been doing, we don't have to do anything different, guys. We just have to not grow weary in doing good. You guys have thoughts about that?
Well said.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one of the things I might add is, inevitably we're going to have conflict with each other. And conflict, I think, is easy for us to think that all conflict is a bad thing. And it's not. Conflict between the two of us, like Rob has been spending a lot of time talking about, is actually really good for us when we handle it well. And when we handle it poorly, we find ourselves in some pitfalls. And it's easy, I think, when we experience those varying levels of conflict over things like masks or who we voted for or racial tensions or various things going on, is we have some things that errors we can fall into, and one of those is pride. We can find ourselves sitting in a judgment seat in opposition to the person that we're having this conversation with, and it leads to us just looking down on people who disagree, or it can lead us to contention or even avoiding that person because we just don't want to deal with that conflict. So we have to be working to humble ourselves and consider and listen and be respectful and gracious. And I think another thing that the conflicts we've experienced in the last 9 months can draw out in us, and this is one that I think is a little more nuanced and harder to identify in ourselves, is our own insecurities. Because we come to conclusions, we come to opinions, we come to convictions, and sometimes we're really not sure about them. And then when we begin to get into a conversation or a debate about various convictions we have, we become shaken by information perhaps we hadn't heard before, or thoughts that we hadn't heard, or even scripture pointed to us that we're like, oh, I hadn't considered that element. And so conflict can draw out insecurities within us, and it can make us become combative, it can make us become defensive, and it can create problems within that relationship. And so as we continue to have conflict over all the different things going on in the world around us, we have to be very careful that we are humble, so that it doesn't create division amongst us, so that it doesn't create disunity amongst us, and that it doesn't create distance in our relationships. And I think that distance is super easy, because if half of us aren't here on a Sunday morning and we disagree with somebody, it's real easy to continue to not come and to continue to allow distance in our relationships. And so I would encourage all of us, as we experience these things, don't be afraid to have the conflict, but be working to do so well in a way that honors and glorifies the Lord. If we avoid the conflict, we create that distance, that division, and that disunity. So just don't be afraid to talk about it, whatever that conflict is.
Yeah. Good. And that's, I think, going to be a theme for the foreseeable future for us, and that's okay. That's a good, hard work, but it's a good work. All right, we're going to switch gears here and talk about some of the things the church that is more organizational with the church. God also calls the church an army. He calls the church a body. Those are kind of functional organizational things. So we're going to switch gears and talk about that briefly, and then we're going to get into kind of a little bit of what's in the future for 2021. So just starting, tell me this. This is the organizational chart. You can't see that. I can't see it from here. Well, there's 3 pastors on top there, and then there's all of the different functions that happen in the church. And Mark and Justin and I kind of divide up somewhat loosely who kind of oversees all the different functions in the church. Although that's a moving target sometimes for us, and we have to keep taking a look at that and trying to do that well, trying to oversee without micromanaging, but also oversee without just saying, well, have fun storming the castle and call us when you're done. So that's there. If you want, but by the way, anything we put up on the slides here, the financial information or any of this stuff, it's absolutely available to you. Most of it is just available if you go on the Cedar Creek website. But if you can't find it there, just ask us. We can get it for you. Just talk a little bit about that. The pastoral team, it's Justin, Mark, and myself. I had forgotten that Justin was appointed in 2020. I had totally forgotten that. It seems like years.
I wasn't expecting a pandemic when I got appointed, I'll be honest.
So Justin is new to the pastoral team, and the 3 of us work together. We work in plurality, meaning that while we have division of labor, some people are better at some things, some people just take on other things. Big decisions are made in unity, and if we have to make a big decision, nobody has we don't have a senior pastor. The 3 of us come together, and it forces us to do just what we were talking about earlier, because we have differences of opinion, and we got to work that out and come to a place where we can all say, okay, that's a good idea, or I would still do it differently, but I trust you guys, so let's do it. So the 3 of us are the pastoral team. We meet together at least once a week, unless someone's gone. But as a general rule, we spend one morning a week together, just talking about church issues, what's going on. We still on the pastoral level. One of the new things in the church budget, just at the end, well for 2021, we kind of started it in 2020 and we formalized it in 2021. Is we have a line item or something in the church budget for kind of continuing education for pastors. We'd never done that before, and it's just such a good idea. Anything you do, it's good to keep learning new skills, keep learning new ideas, and so that's there's money for that now in the budget. And actually, in 2020, I started to do that. Brad Blomberg and I are going through the Colson Fellowship Program. If you're familiar with that, you can go online and see what it is. It's a 10-month program, where it's lots and lots of reading. We watch webinars, and we meet with, if you're familiar with John Stone Street, who does Breakpoint, he's a big part of it. And so every month there's I read 2 or 3 books. Brad and I do lots of articles, daily devotions. It's just been really good. It's been stimulating to me to read so much, and it's been helpful for me because I have my quiet time every morning. But it's been helpful for me to have that structure where then in the afternoon, then I sit down again and I go through my devotional, and on my Monday where I take a Sabbath, I spend a lot of time reading books. So it's just been really, really good for me, really helpful, and that kind of thing is now there's money in the budget to do that, and the church paid for half of the tuition for that, and I paid for half. But the church is buying all the books I read. When I get done reading them, I put them in the library, so you can go read them. They're sitting back there for you. Justin is full-time as a pastor. He does on top of that, or in conjunction with that, or as part of that, he does a lot of the operations manager stuff, which is the job he had before. So he handles a lot of the details and the logistics of what happens around here. Mark is 1 day a week, paid 1 day a week. Is that right? And he handles a lot of the children's programs and the life groups. I am full-time mostly, and what that means is in 2020 I began to work for our region. Our church is part of a region of churches, several in the Twin Cities, North Dakota, La Crosse, Rochester, some different places. There's about 10 churches, I think, in our region. I began to work 1 day a week for the region in 2020, and what that means is I coach some pastors in the southern part of the region and one church in the Twin Cities, and I am on the board of the region that makes a lot of the executive type decisions. So I've been doing that this past year, 1 day a week, and the region pays basically 1 day's work, 1/5 of my salary, and that's been going on. And I just had a conversation with these guys about that, and that's been going well. It's been stimulating for me. I've really enjoyed it. I think it's been good. I think it's been a good thing. If you have questions about that, you can sure ask me. Just very briefly, we don't have time to get into this, but Mark had alluded to it. Our National Association, we've traditionally been part of Great Commission Churches, which was a national organization that was divided into regions, and then each local church was part of a region. The national organization dissolved at the end of 2020. There's all kinds of reasons for that. I had put out a paper on that, and we talked about it some during the year. There's different reasons for it. There wasn't anything, horrible that happened. It was more just a decision that it had kind of run its course, and it needed to kind of get out of the way and allow other things to come into place. So one of the things I've been doing as a regional guy is I've been spending a lot of time this past year working with other men around the country trying to figure out what, if anything, will step into the place of that national board. That's taken up a fair amount of my regional time. I had to. I didn't want to, but I had to go to 2 days of meetings in Miami last week, and so.
Thanks for taking one.
Yeah, I know. So, all right. So that's that. Let's see. Then kind of working down that organizational chart, that there are other things that go on around here. One of the things that we do at Cedar Creek, and we started this last year, is we have what we call an advisory council. And what that is, it's a group of people that meet with the pastors somewhat regularly, somewhat as needed, just to talk about issues in the church and to get input and ideas about what can we do, what should we do, what would be a good thing to do here at Cedar Creek. And the people on that board last year were Brad Blomberg, Paul Fila, Cassandra Bryant, Nikki Rudak, Laura Stanley, Justin, who wasn't a pastor when we started the year, Steve Newman, and Matt Novacek. I know that Steve Newman will not be on the board this year because he and Terry, his wife, are going to spend 6 months a year down in Arizona now, and Justin is now a pastor, so he's not really technically part of that. I'm hopeful that everybody else, I had sent you all an email last week, unfortunately, but I'm hopeful that everybody else will be on it because that's something that's been very helpful, just to meet with the pastors and talk about issues in the church. If you are interested in doing something like that, please contact any one of us. The last thing I'll talk about here is deacons. Every year we appoint deacons, and all of that information, why we appoint deacons, how we appoint deacons, it's on the website. You can look at that in our position papers and our policies. Deacons is something we see in Scripture. Deacons are people who meet certain character qualities, who perform kind of church-wide or more impactful functions in the church. The deacons here at Cedar Creek do their own specific ministry. The only other role that they have is every year the pastors have an overview, basically a performance review. All the pastors have a performance review. That performance review is conducted by a panel of people, one of whom is a deacon. So one deacon from the Board of Deacons will be on that pastoral overview. One member of the Board of Trustees, and then the other two pastors are the ones that oversee those pastors. And so the deacons for this year, Jim Myers, he handles the finances. Emily Wickman is doing Sunday school. Brandon Novacek does Care and Compassion. Don Breedel oversees the building, a lot of things that happen there. Ryan Rudak looks over Awana. Luke Johnson and Greg do all of the kind of Sunday production stuff. Matt Novacek is one of the guys who teaches up here on Sunday morning. That's very much a very impactful thing. So that's the Board of Deacons for this year. Now that's a bit of a fluid board. So as the year goes on, we may come to you and say, hey, we think that we'd like to recognize you as a deacon. One more thing on that before we jump into briefly next year. I want to just recognize one of the deacons that has been serving for a long, long time in a really, really good way that isn't this year, and that's Lisa. Lisa has, for 10 years, was it? 10 years-ish, ran our Sunday school and really, did all of the work behind the scenes and took it on and did it so well. And it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of sometimes pain and sorrow. Anytime anyone who's ever done anything like this knows that there's sometimes you think, what am I doing this for? But she did it well and faithfully for a long time, and this year she's not doing it for different reasons. She stepped down. But we just wanted to recognize you. So Elise, could you come here? We just got a card and a little. Can you grab that? Yeah. And a little gift certificate for you and Tarv to go somewhere. And Mark made you a present. So
Nancy and I were talking on the way to church this morning, and she was recalling that Nancy, my wife Nancy, used to oversee Sunday school, and when Lisa was a college student, she was teaching Sunday school here. Well, was that 3-4 years ago? No. Anyway, so thank you, Lisa. Really appreciate your service over those years. So
yeah. So we're going to talk very briefly. We're going long here, and I told Mark it's his fault that we went long, but.
Okay.
Well, if we divide the time up 3 ways, then it's nobody's fault.
Yeah, really. I think we can really abbreviate goals and plans. We've talked a lot about 2020. 2021, I mean, Rob talked about kind of job one is to continue doing good and doing life together as a church in hopefully creative ways, as we don't know exactly what. We think now there's a vaccine, everything will go back to normal. We don't know what's going to happen in 2021. But we want to move towards those activities that build community. We want to continue our life groups. We want to. We've talked about. We did a few in 2019. We did some Saturday morning roundtables. We've talked about if we did those virtually, would anybody log in? Is that an itch that needs scratching? We've just tossed around a lot of ideas, and we've gotten some ideas from y'all. I would just encourage you to, if you have creative ideas about things that might build up others and create community, let us know, and we'll see what we can do.
And if you guys have ideas about 2021, how we could continue to kind of stay connected with each other, let us know. And the second thing is, a lot of those kinds of ideas are the things that the advisory council talks to us about.
Yeah.
And we say, okay, here's 5 ideas. What do you think would be a good way to do this? And so 2 mics we got to buy now, Jim.
Not in the budget.
I'm back on. So, anything else about 2021?
Yeah, if you, like you said, if you have input, we need creativity. We also need help. If any of you have an idea and it's something you really want to champion or tackle, like I've thrown out, what would it be like if we did a men's ministry where we got together and shot rifles and talked about Scripture, talked about how sin is missing the mark, like missing that bullseye, you know, things like that. If there's things that are on your heart that you think you would like to champion, we'd love to come alongside you and do everything we can to make that happen and help out with that. Yeah, and I think that's probably about it. So when do you want to pray? Well, I can. I guess I just volunteered myself.
Yep.
Well, God, we're just so grateful to be able to gather together as a church. We are so grateful to be your children. We are so grateful that we are going home someday and that heaven and eternity is where we're going to spend forever with you, and that this world is not our home. And so I pray, Lord, as we look towards 2021 and whatever you have for Cedar Creek here, that we would do so holding your hand in faithfulness and honor and glory to your name, and that we would do so in a way, Lord, that promotes unity amongst us, and that we work through conflicts and division and disunity and things that may crop up. And so I just pray, God, that we would keep our eyes ever fixed on your Son and what you've done for us, and that we would stand on that foundation together as a people of Christ, Lord. So we just commit Cedar Creek to you. We commit 2021 to you and pray that you would be working. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Just one more quick thing on the plans. It's not that my wife said 2020 was about making plans and then canceling them. That's just what she did all year long, and so it's a little bit hard to know what to do in 2021 because we don't know what's coming down the pike. So, but the point of that is, if you guys have ideas, my goodness, share them. We really are in all of this together. All right, we're going to take a 3-minute break. If you have Sunday school kids, please go grab them. 3-minute break, and then we're going to do a little bit of worship. We didn't leave you a whole lot of time, Lisbeth. 3 minutes.